All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Beautiful day in Davos. It's great to see all of these faces here. And we are streaming live on LinkedIn as well. So for everyone on the West Coast tuning in at 3:15 in the morning, thank you. You made the right decision to do so. We have a great session today. We are talking about the growth and spread of AI, how companies and governments are reacting to it, what world leaders are saying about it, what business leaders are saying about it, and we have two incredible people to carry on this discussion. So I'll make some quick intros here. So starting with David Schwimmer. David is the CEO of the London Stock Exchange Group. If you are following the company on LinkedIn, make sure you do the group at the end. You will get exactly the right place. David took over LSEG right after Brexit and really transformed the company from an exchange into the world's largest provider of financial services infrastructure, data, and analytics. Satya Nadella is the CEO of Microsoft, also transformational leader, turned Microsoft into the world's leading cloud and AI company, as well as the world's leading business social media company.
There you go.
Thank you for that. So great to have you both here today. Thank you for doing this. Why don't we start off with, Davos is this sort of unparalleled opportunity to talk to people about how leaders are thinking about where they're spending, what they're concerned about. You guys are both in meetings all day long. I'd love to get a sense from you on what business leaders are saying about spending right now. Where are they thinking about spending? Where are they pulling back? And also, is there any kind of regional disparities or any other trends you're seeing? So, David, you want to kick it off?
Sure, Dan, great to be here. Thank you very much. Regional disparities, absolutely. And just to touch on it very quickly, enormous amount of confidence, and that's driving investment in the US. Similarly, Japan, India. Europe, a little gloomier. China, a little gloomier. If you look a little bit more granularly, when we are talking to our customers, the amount of interest in and demand for data and more data, we have seen since 2019 on an annual basis about a 40% per year increase in data consumption.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of that. Last point, a lot of interest in investment. Some of it is out of confidence. Some of it is out of concern or fear of being left behind, given how much change and disruption is going on.
So they're asking you, what are my competitors doing? Do they want to know, how do I benchmark against them?
There is some of that. We're financial market infrastructure. We work with almost every major financial institution around the world, buy side, sell side, a lot of corporates. So we of course don't share any proprietary information about any of our different partners or customers. But people do want to understand how others in the industry are navigating a lot of this challenge, a lot of the transformation, a lot of the disruption.
Yeah. Satya?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a new picture or model for growth, I think, is becoming fairly clear. In fact, when I think about how any economy, or for that matter, any company, grows, is the nexus of energy, compute, connectivity, and capital markets all coming together to build. In fact, one of the formulas I like to talk about is this: tokens per watt per dollar is the new driver of GDP growth. So if you sort of think about it that way, then whether it's the policymakers in countries or whether it's even companies, all of us are saying, okay, where are we on that investment cycle? How are we going to build out that new infrastructure to drive essentially broad GDP growth? And that seems to be emerging, and the regional disparities exist, but everyone, I feel, is getting into more of the build mode. Even in Europe, for example, I think this is going to be a fairly major wake-up call that there's significant comparative advantage on what Europe can uniquely do across industries. And so now the question is, how do you parlay this new infrastructure to that comparative advantage to build the goods and services the world needs out of Europe? And so I think that's the discussion that at least is beginning in earnest everywhere.
And does tokens per watt per dollar, does that resonate? Are companies, and these are companies that are in every industry, and it is not a traditional way to think about how they are, where they're investing. How are they coming along?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think is everybody translates it into what they're doing, right? So this might be, in the past they thought about technology or IT as an enabler, And that's essentially how they think about it. But it's just that it's a new factor of production, essentially, right? If you're a pharma company, how is it accelerating my science? Or if I'm in financial services, in fact, for anyone who's in the knowledge industry, I describe this as lean for knowledge work. And so I think everyone translates it ultimately into a business outcome they care about, by role, by function, by their business sector. But clearly, the need for this new infrastructure to translate into transformation, I think, is pretty self-evident at this point.
Yeah. So every company has to transform. They realize this. Are there concerns that both of you have, that either of you have, around how countries are allowing this, whether it's data sovereignty or whether it is security, or countries just saying, we don't want our data to transfer? What are the things that keep you up at night or that worry you, or that you think governments should be doing instead of what they're doing today? David,
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So you touched on data sovereignty. It's an important one. There's obviously a lot of discussion today about trade and barriers to trade and tariffs. Data sovereignty tends not to get quite as much focus or attention. People focus on chips and cars and ag and things like that. But there are a number of countries around the world that have already placed some challenges to the movement of data. Some of that: China, India, France.
And what does that look like when we say limiting it?
So data localization requirements are the big issue, where there is a requirement to keep within the country of collection through storage and processing the data. And in our business, in your business, that can create some real barriers in terms of serving customers globally, providing data that we may have sourced globally. If you think about fighting financial crime, and we have solutions for KYC and anti-money laundering. Yep. The notion that you have to, criminals don't respect national boundaries. So the notion that the data has to respect national boundaries is really sort of tying a hand behind your back. Right. That's an example. But it also has an impact on economic growth. The estimates we've seen, when you have these kinds of data localization requirements, it can have a hit to 0.5% to 1% on a country's growth rate. So, I mean, these are meaningful numbers. There are some countries that are doing it right. Singapore, Japan, the UK and Singapore have a digital agreement. The UK and the US have a data bridge. Japan has been very forward-leaning on the concept of data free flows with trust, and are pushing that in the OECD. So there are some countries that are definitely doing it right. But I think it's an important topic that deserves to get attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I think building on what David was saying, I think, look, there is a place for data sovereignty. It's obviously, it's an important thing for any country to be able to define what's in their best interest. There could be privacy, there could be security and other considerations that are all very legitimate. But I also think one of the things is what David mentioned is, like, by definition, data compounds value for all participants if it is possible to move it. I mean, that's like, for example, one of the things I've always felt is, take the German Mittelstand, right? They're unbelievable businesses that create world-class products that are available everywhere in the world. Like I always sort of say, hey, I go to a dentist or a jeweler in the United States, I'm surrounded by German Mittelstand, right? I mean, they're German engineering. And I always have thought, okay, all those things in this connected world of ours must be connected. Their data is being collected, and that data is being used to train models, which make that piece of equipment better. So in some sense, I think what has to happen now is policymakers have to think about products and services from their country, not just in their country or any product and service in their country, but what is the broad regime that allows for companies that are born in that country to thrive in a worldwide market. And that is sort of missing in a lot of this thought, right? I mean, I'm not saying you take your eye off privacy or security or any other AI safety. These are all massive considerations. But at the same time, if you want to be pro-growth, you want to stimulate growth, you also have to think about what are the companies that are born in the country that are then going to be able to reach every part of the world and then have the ability to use the data access they have to make products everywhere better, right? I mean, whether it's for LSEG or for Microsoft, when we are able to harness the power of data, keeping to the bounds of tenant security or what have you, but worldwide, if you can't really move data, it just adds transaction cost and friction and raises costs for everybody.
So we think about right now, the conversations are really around goods and services. You'd like to see it about goods, services, and data. And this is kind of what politicians are talking about. Yeah. One of the, there is a big gap between saying we want to invest in AI, and this is what's going to power us in the future, and also having a workforce that's ready for it. Want to really discuss what it means in terms of the transition. But before we get there, one of the questions we've been hearing a lot over the last few days have been companies saying, this is what I'm doing it's gone from last year's conversation about we know we need to be in AI to we're implementing it this way, but we're not sure what we should be doing. You're both in conversations, you are helping companies implement AI solutions. I'd love to understand what you're seeing that excites you right now. Is there anything that you feel like certain companies, partners are kind of pressing the boundaries and things that you would highlight to say, this is what maybe other companies should be looking at? Go ahead.
So I'll touch on a couple areas where we're using it. Some of this we're doing internally, some of this we're doing with Microsoft for our customers. One area where I think you see a lot of companies doing it is in terms of improving customer service.
Right.
And this has become probably the easiest use case, if I can put it that way. We have about 2,200 people responding to customer queries. We have a vast amount of complex data and analytics, and so a question might come in on how do I chart this or use that analytic, and we've just created a large language model that uses all of our internal documentation, and we have put that at the service of our customer service team, and it has made them 50% more productive.
That's incredible.
And
were you getting numbers like that before this? Is that a normal rate of productivity growth?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not. And as that model continues to improve with usage, we expect to, over time, expose it directly to the customers, so that the customer service people can be working on more complex, challenging queries. In terms of what we're doing externally, and we see this getting great reception with our customers, and we're building this with Microsoft, we had a general release in December of the meeting prep product. And this is a product that uses the Microsoft Gen AI technology to, within Teams, create a briefing memo within a few seconds, so less time than it's taking me to describe this to you. A briefing memo. You have a meeting with someone, you punch this into meeting prep, takes our data, so public company info, news, research, macro info, et cetera, and then if you permission it, the information from your files, your emails, your CRM system, and put that all together into a briefing memo.
Yeah.
So that we have seen a lot of interest in, and you can see how, in terms of efficiency and the improvement of workflow, that's a big game changer. Those just a couple examples.
Got it.
And a lot more in.
So sort of the time saved, being prepared examples. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, if you take David's example, right? I mean, whether it's the internal business processes, whether it's customer service, even marketing briefs in the same context as a meeting prep, you can imagine, like I was talking to the CEO of Unilever and what they've done even for their brand managers to be able to give a marketing brief in order to improve the quality of the marketing brief, which then improves the quality of marketing. Just a simple flow like that, how that's really changing. So there's all these internal business processes that I think are able to top down, you're able to leverage them. But if I sort of abstract from there, picking up even on the way, for example, the LSEG workspace product or the meeting prep product are all being built AI first, that I would say for every one of us, including even at Microsoft, there are three considerations that are all fueling how we go about using AI to drive, I would say, the overall productivity of a company. One is you got to be mindful that this AI is got scaling laws, so that means what was Moore's law, like which was 18 months doubling, is now happening maybe 6 or even 3 months, right? Because of all this inference time compute. The reality is you're seeing the doubling of performance or halving of costs every 3 months. So that means you have to have an AI platform that allows you to get the latest sample of the latest model for the different Paretos of the parameter counts so that you have the latest in production, right? Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. So one thing is a very important consideration that you're bringing the latest and refresh rate is 3 months. Then on top of that, you have to build AI solutions, just like how Workspace is being re-architected or how GitHub Copilot was re-architected or Copilot was built. What does that do? It meets the user where they are today and then allows them to change their work artifact, and workflow, right? So it can't just come from, oh, here is a new thing. No, you have to meet the user where they are and then give them utility, value, agency to change the work and the workflow and the work artifact. So that's what we've learned with GitHub Copilot, that's what we're learning with Copilot, and that's what we're parlaying into even products like we're building with LSEG and others, right? So that's the second consideration. The third is, let's say we do all those wonderfully well. It comes to a thing that you brought up originally, which is you have to deploy these. Right. That means people and how we manage all this is going to be the most important thing, right? So first of all, it has to start with end-to-end understanding of the process and how to interject these new AI sort of systems and solutions such that there is real adoption, there is real utilization, and that you know exactly what to automate, where the human should be in the loop. Even, one of the things that I think is going to be true in 25 is going to be, there's going to be copilots and copilots with lots of agents. So Copilot to me is the UI for AI, and inside of it, I'll have thousands of agents, just like how I wrote, say, Excel spreadsheets or documents. But you still need to be able to know which tasks are going to be automated. And then when that fully autonomous agent also should know how to invoke some instruction from me or an exception from me. And so those are real first-class design considerations. So these are all the things that are all simultaneously being worked on.
And are there any examples of that you would point out? If people want real-world examples, what could I get them started in the thinking of what they could roll out in their companies? Are there examples of the work artifact changes or the agentic, any agentic examples you'd point to?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, even, let me just tell you my everyday workflow, right? So since I joined Microsoft in 92 to until 2020 or 2024, nothing really changed in terms of, let's say, if I was meeting a customer, what will happen is my account team will write a report that would sort of be, somehow make its way into my OneNote, and the night before I would have read it, and then just before meeting the customer, I would read it again. But it was just, email, document, sharing, right? Now it's completely different. Like I just go to my Copilot and I say, hey, I'm meeting David from LSEG, tell me everything about LSEG. Mm-hmm. And not only does it interrogate my Office 365 or Microsoft 365 system, it also goes to my CRM system. It brings all of that information in real time. And by the way, it even queries the web, sees what David's up to, all over the place. And then it brings it all in real time to me. And then here's the interesting thing. It just doesn't end there. I can promote it to what we call pages, right? So that's the new artifact, which is an AI artifact. So I say, I'm thinking with AI, collaborating with my colleagues. So I can promote it back. In fact, so my account team now in real time can collaborate. They can annotate it. Hey, that's all fine, Satya, but that's not the major issue, or what have you. And that ability to be able to invert how information flows, right? It flattens the org. It increases the speed of what, Andy Grove used to call knowledge turns, right? Because all of the information is flowing faster. Finally, I mean, we've been talking about this for decades. I think real change. The first time work changed, I would claim, is when email and PCs showed up, and office things like Excel. Like think about forecasting. Like that's what in the late 80s. How did we do forecasts? Like faxes went around, people tabulated inter-office memos, and then somebody said, "Hey, I'll just put Excel in email and send it around, and I'll have a forecast." So that same type of change is happening now with Copilot plus agents.
Yeah. And I can give you a very comparable example within the financial services sector where the industry has basically been using the same kinds of desktops, financial desktops, for 20, 25 years. And you have a lot of systems that are stuck in that kind of legacy where people are typing in 4-digit codes to look up information. And what we're building as part of the transformation of workspace, as you say, AI first, it is fully interoperable with Teams and the Microsoft Productivity Suite, natural language search, AI functionality, a communications capability that is, I would say, what consumers what consumers are used to demanding, but what in the financial sector we haven't seen before. We're putting in place an open directory so you can use Teams functionality across companies. We're plugging in to LinkedIn for verification purposes. Yeah. So it's a dramatic transformation of a tool that's been critical to financial sector users for 20 plus years that hasn't really changed that much. And so very significant there.
And I think that change broadly, right? I mean, what David was describing is if you think about all the financial data, it just lived in silos. And it was not accessible when I needed it, and where I needed it, and it to be composed with other information. And that's what this enables, right? The fact that I can access any information, just use a natural language query to retrieve it, compose it with others. And this is going to happen across every SaaS application, right? So that's when I think about my workflow, I'm no longer thinking of this as a productivity system, a communication system. It's the system.
It's the system.
That system has access through sort of its agents to CRM, ERP, financial data, the web, everything, and it brings back information, and not just brings back information, it can act on the information.
One of the other things it does, you mentioned the flattening of the organization, this access of data to everyone and the ability to do natural language, it changes how we have built companies. You can have it inside LinkedIn. We now talk about this idea of the full stack builder, that you could have people like me with no technical background doing what would previously have been technical things. And Satya, you've talked about, I think the term is a personality engineer going from software engineer. Would you talk about what kind of changes you're seeing in your own workplaces and in partner workplaces? How do companies need to think about how they organize or how they hire, how they kind of encourage skill development within their own companies as this rolls out?
So your comment there, we have been able to use this functionality to create the opportunity for people to speak, write in their language of choice to access what historically had been incredibly difficult, complex databases. Yeah. And so we actually measured, there's one database that we have that does fund ratings and fund analytics, and it took 27 clicks to get to a certain very simple query. And you had to really understand how to navigate the database. And you can now ask.
That was a skill. But someone who was like, I could do all 27.
Exactly.
They were like rock stars.
You had to have the expertise to navigate that and to understand that. What we now have is the ability to ask in simple language. And so massive time saving and the reduction of the need for that special skill. And we're seeing that across. You look at, if I take a step back, you look at the amount of data that people have been inundated with over the last 20 years, and it's been more and more complicating, more and more delivery mechanisms. And I think we're now at a turning point where instead of more and more complexity, you will have an ability to extract much better insight from that much more quickly. Right. And so that is having a big impact on our business, having a big impact on our customers' business. And to come back to your question on what that means for the workforce, it is a different skill set, but to be able to get to that insight much more quickly, a great opportunity for efficiency, but value creation, insight extraction.
Yeah. How is Microsoft changing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the metaphors I like about what this AI age does to skilling or continuous upgrading of skills is that it lowers the floor to learn anything new, and it raises the ceiling simultaneously, right? So that's sort of what's happening because, take even the example you were talking about, which is the LinkedIn one, which I think is a fantastic illustrative one, where, we had, like any engineering team in software, we had product managers, we had designers, we had front-end engineers, other than perhaps now sort of the AI engineer and the back-end systems engineer. this concept of changing the role, scope, and definition to call everybody a full stack builder. Think about what it does, right? It empowers everybody to have a bigger scope and to go at it with the tools so that they can, because the tools have lowered the floor, but it is also then means increase the aspirations of what one can build as a company and as a team. And so that, I think, is what's happening at scale in every function. And to us, it's in some sense, it reduces the fear that I don't have the expertise. If anything, this AI age has made it possible for us to go solve that customer problem, go learn the thing that will make me better at my job without having the fear that, wow, this will take me out of my sort of current comfort zone. I have to learn something else. And it's just all happening in situ, right? I mean, the number of times, it's quite frankly, even for me every day, there's a paper that comes out, somebody sends me something, and I want to go dig in. It's not like 5 emails and then, don't read the responses, whereas now I can actually dig into it and be more informed. And so that means that ability to accumulate knowledge with context has just massively changed. By the way, one other thing I'd just say is one of the studies which was fascinating to me, which came out early this week, was a World Bank study done for students in Nigeria who were using Copilot. And one of the most awesome things I've ever seen is it's the best educational intervention, according to this report, ever in terms of technology, right? So that's what I think it does, right? So it's not just applicable to school kids in Nigeria, it's applicable to every worker in every industry in every country. And so that, I think, is what's going to happen.
There was another study that the Atlantic talked about recently around, it was a study done of a company that does material sciences, and they rolled out an AI application. Nick Thompson talked about this recently on LinkedIn. They rolled out this AI in pieces into the company, and they watched to see how scientists, what they could do differently once they got access to it. Saw a 44% increase in new compounds developed after decreasing productivity. But the interesting part, I mean, this is all interesting, but the most interesting part to me is they saw massive gains in productivity from the best scientists and a 10% increase from sort of the okay scientists. And there was this change in the ability for the best scientists to say, I'm going to throw away, the AI suggested all this stuff, only some of it's really good. I'm only going to test these compounds. I know these are going to be the ones worth testing. It's a long way of asking, does this change the skills that are required that you look for inside of a company to say who you're going to promote or how you decide who is good? I mean, this idea to be able to ask better questions or know what to invest in versus saying everyone just go and start inventing or start building things. I guess the question is, are there new skills that you are counting on or developing inside for this AI age?
Honest answer is it's early days. Okay. We were made a big shift just over the past year in terms of sort of a shift from a lot of hype to actual usage. Right. And I think as we're going through that and as we see our customers going through that, I think I'll have an answer to your question in a little bit of time. But Satya may have a bigger picture perspective.
It's a great question. In fact, I see Marco from Goldman in the front row, and he's the guy who inspired me to think like this, which is he said to me, look, the AI tool does one thing, or AI does the following, which is you can make what is expertise more ubiquitous. Yeah. So you take the best, I'll invert the question. You take the best scientists, and you say, what is the reinforcement learning of that expert's reasoning tokens back into the model that makes that other scientist also expert?
That's interesting.
That's the opportunity, right? If you sort of say, hey, look, I'm just going to increase the expertise level because I can reinforce expertise. And to me, that I think is the exciting opportunity for us.
And are you internally, what are you doing to make sure that that's happening, that you are reinforcing this expertise?
I think that tools access. So to me, the biggest thing is you got to get the tools out there, right? Because otherwise you're sitting waiting, right? So that's why I think it's the standard issue, right? If you remember, remember even in the PC penetration, it was fascinating. Legal first brought it in because they wanted to write contracts in Word or what have you. And then it was finance had Excel. And then at some point, people said, oh my God, everybody needs these office tools to collaborate, communicate, and what have you. So that standard issue is what then changed the entire knowledge work of workflow, work artifacts, and productivity. So the first thing is, same thing we're seeing with GitHub, right? You can't say, I'll give 5 developers GitHub, right? You got to Copilot. You have to give the entire Eng team GitHub Copilot for the full stack dev. And that will then generate, I think, the overall, everything goes up, everything from code quality to speed.
Great. So data everywhere, tools everywhere. Companies need to be trying this all out, experimenting, learning. We're going to come back a year from now and talk about how you've changed. All right, great. Satya, David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.